Greetings. This is Dr. Benoit, and today we are going to review differentiation and cultural relevance, also known as culturally responsive teaching. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. We're doing this for Education 333, 337, and 624. This is the recommended but not required text, and a lot of what we're going to cover today is taken from that book or is taken from references in that specific book. Our objectives are to examine the significance of differentiation strategies to support students' literacy and content acquisition, and to justify how culturally relevant methods and materials are critical to meet students' needs and support their achievement. Our essential questions are: why are differentiation and cultural relevance equity issues? And what strategies can teachers use to differentiate lessons to meet all students' needs? So, why should we differentiate? Essentially, our premise is that all students deserve access to rich and rigorous content. But unfortunately, we know that they do not all enter our classrooms on the same readiness levels. Our goal is to help students acquire proficiency in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. To achieve this goal, it's essential to provide students with skill appropriate, meaningful, sorry, I'm going to go ahead and actually correct that right now, meaningful and interesting methods and materials. So when we are considering the gap between in that first bullet where it says that all students deserve access, but they don't all enter at the same readiness level, what we're doing with differentiation is we are trying to fill those gaps so that everyone has access to rich, rigorous, as it's called, but also appropriate, whether that be ensuring that it is written in a language that, so perhaps we have English language learners or English as a second language who are acquiring our language. And so they may need some specific supports in order to learn the content. And we're going to move on. We're going to talk about different ones that could need differentiation. But essentially, what we're assuming right off the bat is that everybody is not a robot. They're not going to come in at the same level. And we're going to have to meet them at different readiness levels. And I actually almost hate saying the word level because it almost implies like there's a hierarchy. And there's not. It's just unique positionalities that people have in learning and in learning content and understanding. So, what is differentiation? It refers to a wide variety of teaching techniques and lesson adaptations that educators can use to instruct a diverse group of students with diverse learning needs in the same course, classroom, or learning environment. The basic idea is that the primary educational objectives, making sure all students master essential knowledge, concepts, and skills, remain the same for every student. But teachers can use different instructional methods to help students meet those expectations. So that's the point of it. So please take just a moment and look at this chart. These are the 4 different ways that we can actually modify our, we can make modifications to differentiate. We can differentiate for content, we can differentiate for process, we can differentiate for product, and we can differentiate for learning environment. So, and I also want you to pay attention to where we are looking at student characteristics to make those decisions. So if you could just kind of trace across as we move further into the course and we look at some of our major assessments, we're actually going to do all 3 of these. We're going to look at the readiness of our students. We're going to look at the interest of our students, and we're going to look at our students' learning profile. And using those, we are going to try to determine differentiation plans. So Content can be according to readiness and or interests and or a learning profile. Process, you can kind of follow along. Product, kind of follow along and see those lines. And then the learning environment itself can actually be differentiated. I'm going to flip to the other screen because it's going to kind of go into a little bit more detail about what each of those mean. So content is what students learn. We're not changing the content, but look what this means. Ongoing assessment is used to adjust the content, not change it, adjust it, building on student strengths and addressing areas for growth. So for example, we mentioned earlier in the semester, sometimes if we know that our students are at a lower reading level than what the curriculum is, the curriculum text is, sometimes we might pull something that's an easier reading level first to introduce essential concepts. Then we may move to that more challenging text, or we would move. So that's what that's talking about, how the content itself is not changed, it's adjusted. The process for how students learn. So various instructional tools and strategies are used to help students reach learning goals. So there are lots of different processes that we can use to support students. We've done a few in class, different little strategies. We've used the Scamper technique. We've used Strive vocabulary, and we'll use other things like that, but morpheme matrices. And so there are lots of different processes that we can use to help students learn. Products are how students show their learning. So giving them a variety of ways to demonstrate their learning is a differentiation technique that's really asset-based. We're tapping into their strengths so that they can show us what they've learned in the way that is best for them. That doesn't necessarily mean, because we know that there are certain standards that they must meet. And sometimes those are going to be done through specific types of standardized testing, essay writing, things like that. So it's not that we don't ever do those types of things, but it's giving them alternative ways to show it as well. Some content areas really lend themselves to that hands-on learning and that application or performance-based. And so we really want to ensure that we're giving them an opportunity to produce those types of products as well. And then the environment where students learn. Students work in a variety of configurations. So the classroom arrangement can actually support student learning. Sometimes it's going to be individual. Sometimes it might be paired learning or paired reading. And we could go on and talk about how the environment can also be differentiated. So what do we strategically differentiate for? These are a few of the big ones. English learners, striving learners. And so these are learners who sometimes have reading difficulties or reading disabilities. Please note that reading disabilities are going to be identified. This means that they are going to have an IEP or a 504, some sort of special designation that actually we will be working with a special education teacher. The content teacher will be working with a special education teacher to ensure that they're following a specific plan. Special education learners, again, these are going to have specific designations, and we will be working with specific plans for those. You'll be learning about those in your special education courses. And then accelerated learners. And these are learners who are advanced, perhaps even gifted and talented. While these groups, the ones I mentioned, have very unique needs that we oftentimes have very specific plans for, we should be regularly assessing all of our students to identify their learning needs. Because even though they don't have a specific designation, all learners are going to come to us and need differentiation of some sorts. Now let's switch a little bit and talk about cultural relevance. Again, I want to restate our goal is to help students acquire proficiency in reading, writing, speaking, and listening. To achieve this goal, in addition to differentiation, which we just talked about, It's essential for us to create spaces in which students feel safe to take risk, stretch their skills, and expand their knowledge. To create this kind of learning space, it's essential that we select methods and materials that represent the diverse backgrounds, interests, and cultures of our students. So here's a quote from Holly that actually really defines and highlights cultural and linguistic responsiveness. A validation and affirmation of the home or indigenous culture and home language for the purposes of building and bridging the student to success in the culture of academia and mainstream society. When we see the word home and indigenous culture and home language, we oftentimes only think of English language learners, but this isn't true. I want you to think about all of our students who come with, specific cultures. They they all are going to have specific values. They're all going to have specific words, phrases uh, that are going to come through in a home language. Now, while those home languages may not be recognized in school and they're not valued in academia, there is a certain way that we need to speak and we need to present ourselves in certain spaces, school, to be ready for school and the workplace and things like that. Our job is to recognize and affirm where they're coming from and help to build bridges for them to bring that experience, bring their rich backgrounds and heritage into our classrooms, but also help them find a way to articulate it in a way that is going to reach a wide audience. And that's what we're supposed to do with cultural and linguistic responsiveness. So here are 8 competencies for culturally responsive teaching. You will actually review these in the planning course with 317, 318 course. You'll go into detail with these, but I just want to briefly mention them here. Um, Recognize and redress bias. I'm sorry, I want to start with reflect on one's cultural lens. So a culturally responsive educator begins with him or herself. They're looking that those educators are looking inside first, and they're reflecting on their own backgrounds and their own experiences. In this case, they are also addressing their own biases. They're recognizing and redressing biases in the system, and we're talking about within any system within where they work, or where they do their work with their students. And so this means the system at large, but this also can perhaps mean a specific school. Sometimes you'll see this. We're drawing on students' culture to shape curriculum and instruction. So this means we're going to kind of delve into a little bit about what this means in some future slides coming up. We are attempting to bring real-world issues into the classroom. So as much as possible, we want to make our content have meaning for them. We want to not only give them knowledge, but we also want to give them a framework about how to make decisions and how to critically think. We always want to model high expectations for all students. So this means there is a difference between scaffolding and watering down content. And notice this, the little arrow here, it's slowly giving our students like a little staircase to help build them to higher learning. It doesn't simply lower every single one of those bars so that it's achievable. It starts with something lower so that we can build their capacity for richer achievement. It promotes respect for student differences. And so there is definitely not an assumption here that it's a one-size-fits-all sort of world. It acknowledges diversity and it promotes the inclusion of all students. A culturally responsive teaching model is very collaborative with families and the local community because it acknowledges the key role that families and the community play in shaping our young people. And it communicates in linguistically and culturally responsive ways. So a culturally responsive teacher communicates in linguistically and culturally responsive ways. This means that we really assess our word choice. We assess the way that we address specific issues. We're constantly trying to put on the lens of our students when we're making decisions about how to present content. Doesn't mean we're perfect. None of these means that we're perfect, but it means that we're striving to build those bridges and to be very validating of who our students are as individuals. So culturally and linguistically responsive classrooms are print rich. They are going to have they're going to have lots of text. They're going to give our students exposure to lots of text. They display the linguistic supports multilingual learners and others need to be successful. So for when it says it displays them, this may be like posters on the walls. These are perhaps like mindsets or frameworks that are present within the classroom that we can use our students can use over and over again. Maybe it's going to be like some question stems that are posted on the walls that allow us to have meaningful discourse around the content that we're learning. Academic vocabulary is explicitly taught, and again, it's going to be displayed, especially within the unit that it's taught in. So it's going to be those academic vocabulary words are keys to our students understanding our content. And so they're going to be explicitly taught. Students are going to see them as bell ringers. They're going to see them in their workbooks. They're going to see them in their online platform, and they're going to be displayed in their room. Active and regular utilization of the 4 language and literacy domains are going to be a prominent feature in lessons. So reading, writing, speaking, and listening, all of our students are going to have opportunities to do all 4 of those things. So I want you to consider the traditional model of essentially like sit and get, where the teacher was in the front of the room, all of the students were facing the front, and basically the teacher was just kind of shoveling out knowledge the entire day. The students never worked with a partner. They never worked on some sort of activity that allowed them to apply in the moment what they were learning. Those are outdated teaching methods, and we know that they are ineffective for strengthening literacy. So we've got to consider lesson plans that allow our students to do those 4 things. Culturally and linguistically responsive classrooms integrate methods and materials that are reflective of a variety of cultures and perspectives. And we will see this not only in the materials, but in the methods themselves. The teacher has been thoughtful about assessing some of the cultural norms of her students and maybe some of the individual ways that our students learn, our individual learners learn. And that teacher has tried to integrate those into the methodology of planning, the lesson planning itself and the lesson teaching. And then student work is going to be prominently displayed and it's honored. The student work is something that the culturally responsive teacher is basically like shining a spotlight on how bright her students are, how capable they are. And he or she is showing how much she values, that work by putting it in a prominent place in the room. Culturally responsive curriculum is something that teachers need to be really aware of when they are selecting texts. It needs to be texts that tap the learner's interest and represent their students. So when we talk about representation, students need to see their cultures, their genders, their backgrounds represented. They need multiple perspectives on issues. We need to make sure that we're thinking globally about the way we teach things. We need to give them lots of perspectives in order to make their decisions. Considerations for home languages and cultures are going to be part of the curriculum choices and the supplements and supports. The curriculum is going to be supported by supplements such as visual aids, videos, etc., that enhance and reinforce the content. Um, Culturally responsive curriculum is one that promotes it promotes students extended research. So it's going to give students ideas and possibly even time to do some individual or group projects that allow them to explore a topic of interest within the content. It allows them to make real world connections, and it helps make those bridges for them. And it provides pathways for them to make them for themselves. And culturally responsive curriculum fills essential gaps in students' prior knowledge. So this is where we're acknowledging we perhaps do some pre-assessments to see what they already know. And when we find not only those individual needs, but those patterns, we begin to automatically embed those supports in our curriculum, whether it's present in our regular curriculum or whether we need to modify that curriculum and bring in some additional supports. So here are some final thoughts about differentiation and culturally relevant or culturally responsive teaching. All students deserve a high quality education that supports their literacy acquisition skills and content knowledge building. Differentiation and culturally relevant methods and materials promote an equitable learning environment for all. Culturally responsive teaching acknowledges the needs and assets of all learners and provides pathways for them to hone their reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills in our domains. Ultimately, we want our students to be able to take those reading, writing, speaking, and listening skills into their own lives, into their own worlds, whatever that means, whether that is in the realm of a consumer when they're making purchases, whether that is going to be in the workplace when they are pursuing a career in the trades or in a professional field, whether that's on a college campus when they're trying to extend their learning, whether it's as a parent or a caregiver when they are trying to navigate the needs of someone else. We want to make sure that we are giving access to high quality education. And that is why differentiation and culturally relevant methods are equity issues. Without those pieces, we are not able to recognize the individual differences of all of our learners. And so differentiation and culturally relevant methods allow us to affirm, acknowledge, and meet those individual differences in a way that promotes their achievement. I hope that this has been beneficial for you, and I look forward to seeing you in class.